And welcome everyone. Kyle Martin here for Discover Marshalltown, and I am obviously not Denny Grabenbauer. I'm a little bit shorter and I have quite a bit less hair than the Honorable Dennis Grabenbauer, who started this program many years ago. He's stepping away for a while, so I will be filling in for Denny. And I am the morning show host on KFJB Radio, also the operations manager at KFJB Radio here in town. You may hear my morning show and a lot of the people that we will interview on this program, I actually interview on the radio. And a little bit about myself. I'm a graduate of Drake University in Des Moines. The School of Journalism and Mass Communication is where I got my degree in radio in 1989. Started in radio in Des Moines at KIOA Radio, and I've just kind of bounced around to various communities throughout the Hawkeye State, and ended up at KFJB Radio about, a little over 12 years ago. So I've had an opportunity to talk to many dignitaries, many movers and shakers and newsmakers in our community. And one of the newer newsmakers that I've had an opportunity to talk to on the radio just recently is Bob Untiedt. And Bob is the brand new director of our Orpheum Theatre complex here at Iowa Valley Community College. We want to welcome Bob. Bob, thank you very much for being here.
Sure, thank you.
And let's get a little bio on you if we could. I did a little research on you.
Oh.
Yeah, well, you know, you can Google anybody.
Yes, that's
now,
right.
I did a little research on you, and much like my radio career, bouncing around at different stops, you have also done that, but you are an Iowa native. Why don't you tell us where you've been?
Sure. I grew up in Davenport and then went to high school in Durant, about 20 miles west of there. Then I went to Coe College in Cedar Rapids, and I spent most of the next 20 years, at least 3 years each, in Kansas City, Chicago, Milwaukee, San Francisco, and Los Angeles.
Wow.
I moved back to Iowa after the last job I had outside the state was doing community organizing with churches in Hollywood, where my title was executive director, so I was then a Hollywood director.
So what did you get to do in Hollywood? Did you get to rub elbows with any famous directors, producers, actors?
There were weird sort of things like that. The guy who plays Cliff on Cheers,
John Ratzenberger.
His mother goes to one of the churches I did organizing in. So the first year I was there, on Christmas Eve, he read some readings during that service, and he sounded like Norm on Cheers. It was Norm.
Yeah.
It was Norm on Cheers.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, it was Norm.
Okay.
Yeah. I went to a concert at a different church where Nicolas Cage's mother went, and he ended up showing up to that, and you couldn't get near him. You couldn't get within 3 pews. He had a whole posse of people. It was random stuff.
Right.
I had as an important volunteer a guy who was the priest in the movie the Titanic.
Okay.
Very small role, right?
Yeah.
It was that kind of level of thing.
Right, right. So you primarily work behind the scenes then?
Well, the community organizing I did had nothing to do with movies or TV, right?
Yeah.
We were there to affect social change. So.
That's great. Yeah. In San Francisco, what did you do?
The same
exact
thing. That's right. We helped to create after-school homework centers and improve neighborhood park safety and a number of other things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And most recently, you've been in Ottumwa, right?
Yeah. I was the director of Main Street Ottumwa there for 3 years or so.
I also was on the radio in Ottumwa for a year, and it's a nice little community. It's starting to kind of make a comeback a little bit.
Yeah.
And
I think in the last 10 years, they've invested almost $9 million in the downtown.
Yeah.
I went back there a month and a half ago because we were the developer on a project to create 24 upper story apartments.
Right.
And some of the funding that they got from the state was strangely through the last monies that they had left over from the stimulus funds. And somehow it got channeled such that Ottumwa will end up, when this project is completed, having the highest percentage of green roofs in their downtown of any town in Iowa.
That's
They're going to have
amazing.
vegetation growing on top there.
That's amazing. Yeah, that community, like a lot of communities, is starting to see a little bit of a comeback. Nice little river community down there in southeast Iowa. Well, you are here now. You're in our community, and you have taken over directorship of the Orpheum Theatre complex. How long have you been here?
Since the end of March, so
okay,
whatever that is.
Sure. And it's a pretty big role. I mean, to step in and take over the directorship, and you know, there's so many things to this job that you may not have dealt with in previous jobs. Have there been any things that you stepped into and you were like, oh, I didn't see that coming? Not maybe in a good way, a good or bad way. Is there anything that you saw, you know, when you maybe were going through the interview process that excited you?
Oh, sure. I just think the opportunity to some extent, once one does community organizing, you never leave it. Sure. So I really believe that what I'd like to do is make sure that we do a lot of effective marketing and that we are regularly engaging people to figure out the kind of programs, that there's some sense of ownership about it, and that we even increase sort of more participatory activities there, whether it's I don't even know, a game night for adults or like I'm on the board of the Iowa Children's Museum, and we may end up doing like you've heard of STEM. Right. And there's also a thing called STEAM where they throw in art, so it's science, technology, art, and math. We may end up doing a thing like that, but my whole sense is that to be collaborative with other arts groups, so we wouldn't schedule that sort of thing at the same time the community theater does their theater workshops, and we wouldn't duplicate others' efforts either. Right. So.
Well, I know that before you got here, the Orpheum Theatre complex, and I say complex because it's so much more than just the theater. I mean, there are many, and we'll discuss some of those as well. But before you got here, it was used a lot for community type theater, I would say, and musicals and stuff like that, musical performances in the Black Box Theater. Now, not so much now, but you were thinking of new ways to use some of that space.
Right. What I've heard from people, what I've seen in terms of a limited number of videos and pictures, is that there was extraordinary theater that has happened in that Black Box Theater. I was probably living in Cedar Rapids then. I wish I would have known, because I would have come to those plays. But the cost of the production of those things, there was no way, if we had sold tickets for $75 each and had sold out shows for 3 weekends, maybe they would have broken even with corporate and other support. So my sense is to just be a little bit more sustainable. We'll probably always need to have a meaningful amount of support from the college, a subsidy, and among the things that, for instance, I would have just been terrible at dealing with would be the pretty advanced HVAC system in that building. If it were a standalone nonprofit, that would be challenging for me to figure out even what consultants or businesses to contract with to get that fixed. So the college services and subsidy are really important to the continued existence of that.
The Black Box Theater, and I refer to that again, like you said, with the productions that were there. That space, it may or may not be being utilized right now. Are you thinking of maybe doing, for lack of a better term, some artsy things? Because I think our community is really trying to put an art stamp with the Lynn Creek Art Festival coming to mind. That space could be really utilized for different art type projects.
I've had one conversation with someone about the possibility of doing even a visual art presentation in August there. So that's very likely to happen. There's others, and I'm looking at trying to find out what would attract people. But we've done like open mic nights with students from MCC in the movie theater. But my expectation though too is that a lot of what we'll continue to do is what Michael Oxley even was doing with musical events in that, like every other month or something.
Yeah, you have a musical act come in. The Orpheum Theatre, a little background on it, and I don't know how much you know about the Orpheum Theatre itself. Built in 1948 by RKO Company, and it was closed for a period of time, for like 5-6 years or something like that, till it, yeah, I think it was 2005 to 2010 it was closed. And then they had a grand reopening. I was at it. They had the spotlight and the red carpet. It was neat. Now, like you, I did not, see the Orpheum in its grandeur of the late 40s, early 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s even. But it's neat to see it now. Do you get people that stop by on a daily basis and just say, this used to be here, this used to be there, oh, I had my first date here, I remember when it seated this many, do you get people that reminisce about the history?
And we have an advisory council now that has some people who, as kids in their 60s, sold tickets for that movie theater. So yeah, it was originally 900 seats. In the 80s, it changed to 2 315-seat theaters. Wow. So it's evolved a number of times over time.
Did it have a balcony?
No, I don't think it.
I don't know why, but for some reason I envision that as having a balcony. But golly, 900 seater. Right. It still has some history to it. I like to think about the curvature. It doesn't have a lot of right angles in the lobby area. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, especially that entryway has a couple of unique and important historical features. But for instance, the letters that are used in the marquee are from the 1940s. And we can't get new ones. I mean, there's no place to go to. Sure. I mean, we have to treat them with a lot of care in climbing up a ladder and placing them there. But and that also means that there's a limited number of phrases we wouldn't be able to write just because we don't have enough ease or whatever it is. So that's an interesting sort of feature. Then the other thing is, outside the ticket booth itself, there really is a curved piece of glass. Yeah. That's an extraordinary. I mean, I know nothing about how you make glass, but what I've heard from 2 different people is that that's an enormous amount of work to do, and it would be incredibly costly to reproduce. Yeah. Also, the chandelier that's there, it's not diamonds or anything, but there's something like 2,000 crystals in that thing. So amazing.
And I often think of the curvature around the men's restroom. Yeah, I don't know why, but that particular wall being curved is very neat as well. Let's talk about the memorabilia collection in the Orpheum, because there is a huge collection of movie memorabilia from Iowa actors and actresses. You want to talk a little bit about that?
There's a group of folks, about 5 or 6, that come almost once a week to look at the existing collection and then rotate things like on an every other month sort of basis within that. And they work a little bit with the marketing department to get signage made and stuff like that. But they're regularly in there just sorting through things and rehanging and a number of other things. But we'll get people that just wander down the hall near our office that are looking at and surprised by this number of people from Iowa that have been in movies.
Yeah, I know you and I have talked on the radio before about this, and I am completely blown away by people. Like you said, I had no idea they were from Iowa, and I'll wander down the hall at the Orpheum and go, wow, they were from, some little town I never heard of, and a lot of people don't realize we've had 2 Superman actors from Iowa, which is kind of cool. Brandon Routh and George Reeves. That's kind of neat too. I would say that probably a lion's share of your collection there would be devoted to Gene Seberg.
Well, a disproportionate amount, certainly. That's right. And they, this body of people also is heavily involved in the annual Seberg Festival, which I think the other full-time employee, Tammy Losing, has had a significant role this year in kind of reshaping that. So there will be 1 or 2 movies that have Gene in them that will be shown during that festival this fall. But in addition, I don't know that it was Tammy for this part, but they're working with a professor in fashion studies at Iowa State, And that woman, whose name now escapes me, is working with one or more of her classes to focus on the way in which Gene Seberg influenced fashion of the late 60s.
Right.
And they're going to recreate, they may do a small fashion show in that movie theater.
Oh, neat.
Then. And the last part is that we're working with folks here at MCC. We're going to be contacting students between 14 and 17, I think, years old, to train them in movie making, a really elementary sort of thing over a span of a week. But we'll be showing as part of that festival like 5 to 10 minute movies from what we hope will be, a few dozen young adults in the area.
Wow. Okay, we're going to take a break, Bob. We're going to be right back, and we will talk more about Gene Seberg right after this.
You're on your way to meet up with friends, but you can't seem to get anywhere quickly. You don't want your friends to be annoyed, so you text. You're on your way. Five seconds is the average time your eyes are off the road while texting while driving. Make sure you get where you're going.
Welcome back to Discover Marshalltown. My name is Kyle Martin, and we have Bob Untiedt, director of the Orpheum Theatre. We left off before our commercial break. We were talking about Gene Seberg and the Gene Seberg Festival, Film Festival. Bob, is that still going on in some capacity? I mean, we're still doing something with that, correct?
Right, that's right. Well, it'll be at the end of October, the beginning of November, when the filmmaking workshops will happen, and then I think it is that first weekend in November when they'll show those films made by kids and with Gene, and then have this fashion show.
Yeah, and we did talk a little bit about Gene's look, her wardrobe, her haircut, and you alluded to her iconic fashion sense, and I would agree with that. She kind of inspired a whole new look there, and that's neat that you're thinking about doing something to replicate that.
Well, I've had this one conversation with this professor from Iowa State who said that Audrey Hepburn and Grace Kelly were influenced more by Gene Seberg than vice versa.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Well, let's talk about some of the activities, because since you have come to the Orpheum, you have spearheaded some live entertainment, some live after 5 get-togethers on Fridays. You want to talk a little bit about those?
Sure, sure. I think kind of the priorities that I've had in coming as the director include creating new leadership. So we're adding members to an advisory committee that will give us input on programming and marketing. We're actually in the process, it'll take months to get a different government level approval of creating a new nonprofit that will help us with fundraising exclusively. And that's a place where I'm hoping that we'll find 30 or more folks from Marshalltown that will really take an active leadership role in helping to lead what that organization moves towards. But the second thing that we've started since I've been there is really just getting some activity going on a more consistent basis. So whether it's the Live After 5, actually there's a number of businesses, a couple of banks, insurance companies, others that sponsored. We got exactly the amount necessary to pay for all, I think, 8 or 10 bands that we have. And it's a nice mix of sound as well. There's bluegrass, there's folk, there's country, there's rock and roll. We had the first ever use of that outdoor amphitheater was a four-piece Latin guitar group that was really extraordinary. Yeah. And we've had blues too.
Right, yeah, and you're continuing that, and this is something that you're thinking about doing next summer as well?
I expect so. I mean, I think that we're averaging around 120 or so people a week. I think that continuing to do it will increase that awareness, and people are really, I think, are enjoying the thing. It's every Friday from 5:30 to 7, and it's really pleasant. We also have. Currently, we're having food vendors that rotate. So we've had Smokin' G's once. We'll have them again. We're having Maria's Tacos for 2 weeks. We get Zeno's showing up in July, and the folks that own the Midnight Ballroom are doing some stuff in August for us as well.
Very good, very good. And I think first and foremost, a lot of people think of the Orpheum as a movie house.
Right.
And you are indeed showing some summer movies for kids. You want to talk a little bit about that?
That's a really exciting thing, I think, too. And the partnerships that we have to sponsor this thing, which allow us to show these movies for free. Kids have to go to like the Chamber of Commerce, Smoke and G's, G&B Bank, the Bike Company, a few other places downtown to pick up tickets. Even though it's free, they have to go into these businesses. So it's a marketing thing for them. And then, you know, like this weekend we're showing The Jungle Book at the end of the month in a little bit of a partnership with the library. They're bringing in the Blank Park Zoo the last week, which we're promoting as we can, and then we're showing Zootopia, so it's sort of Zoo Week for the two of us.
It's a great film.
Yeah.
It's a great idea. You don't necessarily show first-run movies, but you get them pretty quick right after they've been in, you know, a major motion picture release. It's you know, it's a month or two maybe down the road. And I know that whole negotiation process of getting first-run films sometimes could be a little tricky. Have you had to deal with motion picture companies and some of these films?
Yeah, and I'd even done a little bit of that when I was in Ottumwa. We did an outdoor movie thing. There's only one slight snafu or hitch that we had. We wanted also with the library the first week of July to show one of the Harry Potter movies because they were doing a book. They were doing a book study of like the first or second book, I think. Then, well, it turns out I think there may be another Harry Potter movie coming out.
Well, I know there's another Harry Potter book, strangely enough, that's coming out. I just read that the other day.
Well, but something related to that led studios to forbid the use of the existing Harry Potter series for like a period of months. Okay. So that's the only minor snafu we've had that way. Yeah. And they restrict the kind of advertising we can do, and it's other stuff like that. But, you know, we're also not paying what a regular theater would be paying to show first-run movies. It's pricey, but it's not the probably thousands of dollars that a first-run movie would do.
Sure. Let's talk about the concession stand. I love the historic lobby. We talked a little bit about the ticket booth, but the concession stand has incredibly reasonable prices to go along with the reasonable price to see a movie. You know, address that, and I love the usher outfits as well.
I think that like standard movie theaters have an existing joke that most movie houses, because the movies themselves are so expensive, are food venues that show films. But, I think arguably we have the best tasting popcorn in Marshalltown. I'm willing to accept any challenge if anyone wants to make it, but it's in the oil, I think. And that's pretty good. So.
Well, you've got some employees that work there. Are some volunteers or some employees through the college? How does that whole thing work?
I think we may share a person that works in the college who works part-time. But otherwise it's just people from the community, and then they're also our volunteers. And we're looking to rebuild the volunteer base as well. So.
Well, when the reconstruction and the work was redone on the Orpheum Theatre complex, the movie house got shrunk. It became smaller. What did you say, 150 seats? 158, somewhere around there. And that allowed for the Black Box Theater to be there. There's other spaces in the Orpheum Theatre that can be utilized as well. I think of meeting rooms and convention, maybe a small convention space. You want to talk about some of the space that's available for rental?
Well, the first exposure I had to this building was when I was working at Main Street at Ottumwa. Regularly, Jenny Eder in the Central Business District, if the Iowa Economic Development Authority is looking to do something, training regionally for the Main Street Iowa thing, they'll use those rooms upstairs, which they can be divided in half, but you can seat 50 people in there pretty reasonably comfortably. And I have to say that was the first exposure I had to the building, and it's an impressive thing. I think the other advantage that we have over other sometimes rental places, like even the library, is that having that coffee shop down below makes it very convenient to refill your coffee if you're there in the morning, or just have lunch brought up fresh.
Sure. Yeah, and I was going to talk about the coffee shop. a little bit. Now, if I remember correctly, when the construction process was going on, there had been a small restaurant that was like either adjacent to the Orpheum Theatre at one time, and then it was absorbed in the whole complex itself and became a coffee house, because we used to have a lady that worked at the radio station, and her dad actually ran the eatery that was part of, in fact, I think some of the menu items were still on the coffee shop wall, which was kind of neat to see. But that coffee shop, you know, it's kind of neat to be able to pull right up there curbside and get a cup of coffee. Doesn't take you very long to run in there.
Right, that's right.
Are you starting to see a lot of folks going there for a Danish or coffee? I mean, starting to pick up business-wise?
There are groups that will come back in the sort of gallery area, and we'll see, you know, gangs of men and women that come and sit for, you know, 45 minutes or whatever and chat and do that stuff. We're going through a little bit of a transition at this point too, though. Peggy, the woman who runs it currently, her husband's health is suffering. So she's, actually her last day is Friday.
Okay.
So we'll probably be closed until the beginning of September. We've already met with a couple of prospects. We're going to be advertising more, you know, seeking requests for proposals. And my expectation is that by September 1st, we'll have a new facility.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's you know, that's a great add-on to the building. Let's talk a little bit about for students with Iowa Valley that want to learn how to build props and scenes and stuff like that. I know a lot there was a studio type space there at the Orpheum that was used for prop building and scene building. Is that still being utilized?
Not as an academic program.
Okay.
I think that the use of that space moving forward will probably be pretty limited. At this point, we're going to listen and learn from people about how much they want to have theater there. But it just, the history of the Orpheum is one that suggests that the costs of theatrical productions are just so significant that we'll probably limit that. One idea I'm going to explore will be, we're more than an hour and 15 minutes away from something like 8 different colleges and universities. So I may call the director of the theater department at the University of Iowa and Iowa State and UNI and Drake and, you know, whatever, and just say, would you consider once in the next 2 years extending one production by a day? And coming to Marshalltown. And we'll do a minimal sort of staging thing. Yeah. I think one of the things that Michael Oxley did, one of the last things he set up was a group called the Stubborn Children's Theater. And they did a really interesting, it was essentially a musical production, but they did it in sort of the form of a kind of a miniature play. Like 80% of everything that happened there was singing, but they acted out this USO troupe and some adventures that they had, and they read cables, like, we got this note from the boss, right? And so there's some dialogue to it. They brought their own sort of set even, put it together in about 30 minutes or something. But that kind of thing that sold out the Black Box Theater and that people really enjoyed, I think is the kind of theatrical sort of stuff we'll look to do.
Very neat. In case you're just tuning in, we are visiting with Bob Untiedt, director of the Orpheum Theatre, and he has brought some really neat live entertainment to the amphitheater just to the east of the Orpheum, and also is doing some summer movies for kids. That you know, some new initiatives that he is kicking off at the Orpheum Theatre. If somebody would like to take a tour, because we did kind of talk about this at the beginning of our interview, that people just walk in and that they may talk about, you know, their first date. They may talk about a film, Jimmy Stewart film they saw there. They want to reminisce about the old days. You know, are tours available to look at the memorabilia, or can folks wander around?
Sure, we have actually, since I've been here, probably done 4 tours, even for small groups of people. But anyone that wanders into our office, if we're not terribly absorbed in preparing for the next band showing up on Friday or something, we'll take them around right now. I even did that with some of the bands that have been there at Live After 5, like at 7 o'clock. We'll just give them a quick tour of the ground floor. So, yeah.
Does your job, is part of your job entail looking for grant money, or the next paycheck, so to speak, to help improve and build up the facilities there? Is that part of your job?
Oh yeah, I mean, so fundraising generally is part of the job. I think that the steps that I'm looking at though is like, let's reestablish some leadership, so volunteer kind of board level, more strategic thinking, do a limited number of things that just show some momentum, these free movies and the Live After 5 thing, you know, get some real community input, and then we have the basis for the program for the next year. That we'll look for corporate support, we'll look for individual donations, and we'll look for grants, you know, certainly.
Great. The Orpheum Theatre complex is a historic facility, obviously dating back to 1948. We talked a little bit about that. I have not had an opportunity in a long time, and I probably should have gone back and looked at some of the photos before I had you on, but there are some really neat old black and white photos of movie premieres that I've seen from the Orpheum. Has anybody brought in anything like that from over the years and said, you know, hey, I saw, you know, Wizard of Oz, or I saw Midway, or something like that? Have you seen any memorabilia that people have just, you know, kind of walked into you?
No, there's only one piece of memorabilia that anyone's brought in since I've been there. It was actually a person who's part of the leadership of the Meskwaki Indians. And he gave us a letter that he wrote to Gene Seberg in the mid-70s and never mailed. Oh, wow. Where he offered to make her an honorary member of the tribe. And it's 3 legal-sized pages, handwritten. Wow. Right? But he just dropped in. We talked for about 20 minutes, and I have it at my desk. I'm not exactly certain what we do with that entirely, but it was pretty significant. I mean, I don't know how much people in Marshalltown or Iowa generally know, but she was really socially progressive and invested in people in Marshalltown and with the Meskwaki folks in ways that I just think she deserves a lot more credit for.
Absolutely. We're out of time, Bob. Thank you for being my first guest. I think we did okay. That is Discover Marshalltown, and Bob Untiedt has been my guest. I'm Kyle Martin.